Is it better? Okay. Hopefully it stays that way. All the sound fuckery today. Alright. Back to one more chapter. Except you know what? Fuck it. We're on break mode. Because my timer reset with restarting OBS, so I don't know how much quote unquote productivity time I'm supposed to have left. So I'm gonna go murder some shit. Because, yeah. Fuck computers. Just fuck them. 9 minutes to finish this before Whispers reset. We'll see if I can do it. Oh, I guess I should probably, switch to the full screen for this, huh? Alrighty. So, of course it's a slay all. I might not be able to do this in 9 minutes then. I was hoping it was just quick objectives I could run through. Let's see. Slay alls tend to be a little bit easier when it's just me, just because then things aren't running all over the place like madmen. It's just me. I'm the only thing running around everywhere like a madman. Not enough room in here for everyone else to have stupid antics, just me. That was a waste of my shit. Not that I need it, but it's still fun to have when I run into an elite pack like this one that was right next door. What? Why? I keep getting stuck on like everything. Jesus fuck. I really wish it still showed the time I have left. I mean, not that I would ditch out of this before it's completed if that's been running out of time, but... Oh, wait, no. Yeah. Need to head down that way first, probably. Digging the epic music today. It works. I mean, probably not gonna work. I should remove it from being in my VOD, but, that's okay. Okay, well, at least we're at the next point. What's next? Slay Emerus. Okay, now I can just look this bitch. Maybe murder some elites, because I can't say no. It's so shiny. Making with the shank. Too much. Oh, another named bitch. Not correct, named bitch. Right, keeping with my left strategy here. And there he is. Hello, friend. Yes. Still got my credit. Alright. Just out of curiosity, how much time do we have left now? 3 minutes. So that took me 6. Definitely can't complete 1 and 3, so I will do proper break. Get some caffeine, B vitamins, sustaining bullshit. And I will be back to read chapter 1 and continuing with edits and, trying to be a productive human. Just realized this screen does not have a chat on it. Don't know where I'm gonna fucking put that shit, but I'm gonna put it on here since I'm actually using this screen now. Well, let's see. I think that's that. Yeah, there we go. That is it. We'll just make it all small and put it behind there. Yep, I am using Pomodoro. Happy Friday to you too. So yeah, I'm doing a consistency, really read through, but also like quasi edit. So there's a fair amount of suggestions from my editor the first time I went through that I did not accept. So now had some time and distance, and I'm going through book 1 of my series. I'm going into editing book 2. And I'm in the middle of rough drafting book 3. So I figured it's a good time to reread and make sure I got things consistent and I'm not fucking any shit up or forgetting things that are important from book 1. So that's what I will be doing my best to read. I will admit there are more than a few chapters that are kind of tough for me to get through, so we'll see how it goes. Alright. Chapter 1, James. James kept his head under the blanket. He could not see any better in the darkness when he dared to peer out of it. But the blanket was warm. It was a barrier. It suffocated him in its safety. Papa had headed out with the other men to check the fields. James had never known that a cow could scream, but they could, and they had tonight. Not long after he had heard the pitiful yelp, someone had knocked on the door. There were many sharp, hurried whispers between the adults. He knew their attempts to be quiet were because the adults believed he was sleeping, so he stayed still and pretended. His father had gone to grab his shoddy and his coat and left. James knew his mother was there, sitting with the view out of the window, waiting. He wanted to crawl up into her lap and sleep against her chest, but he could feel her tension filling the room. She would hold him gently, rock him softly, whisper kind words to him, and put him back into bed to return to her worry-filled vigil. So he stayed in bed. Best not to make her worry about him not sleeping, on top of worrying for Papa. I'm not sure about that last section, but I'll come back to it. He lay as still as his little restless body would let him. He was grateful that his father was not the one left at home. His Alara father likely knew James was still awake before he had left. The sense the Alara shared with each other and the Alara children was a strong bond. James shared the same bond with his mother, but it was one way. He could feel her, sense her thoughts at times, but she was oblivious to it. Without facial expressions and gestures in the dark room, she was unaware of what her son was experiencing in his bed in the far corner. He closed his eyes, reached out mentally, and felt for his mother. He found her in his mind, just as he had sensed. He held her there in a youthful hug, and found that she relaxed slightly. The air in the room around him, even under the blanket, felt lighter. He smiled softly to himself and leaned into the mental image further. He slowly began to drift off to sleep. I forgot to fucking start my timer, didn't I? Alright. I'm not sure if this timer actually has sound either, because I played with it last night but forgot to set it to monitoring mode for audio. So So we'll have to see. Oh, so that's supposed to be behind my little frame thing. I wonder if I can edit it this way. I'm going to grab a few sips of tea and then continue here. Alright. The scream woke him up. It was close. Closer than the fields. He sat up in bed. He was covered in sweat, even though the night was not very warm. He could feel the fear rising around him. It seemed to be pouring into the air from everywhere in the town at once. A series of soft steps made their way toward his bed. The air thickened and pressed against him, as if trying to choke him. James, we have to go. His mother's voice was barely more than a whisper. I am back. Now let's see. So, where was I? Oh yeah, his mother's voice was barely more than a whisper. A light sparked up outside the window, and he saw his mother's face in a quick flash. Her brow was furrowed, her eyes wide, and she was half crouching beside the bed, ready to burst forward into a sprint. He slid out of bed next to her, grabbing his pants and shoes, putting them on. No words were needed. Once he was ready, he slipped his hand into hers, and she led him to the bedroom that she shared with Papa. She opened the back door. There was about 20 feet of open space beyond the door, before a copse of trees. Copse? I don't know how to pronounce that. I just read the word. Door before a copse of trees that would hide them from whatever was happening on just the other side of the buildings. James felt her body tense up, preparing to move. He also felt the shadow in the copse. He squeezed her hand gently and pulled back, hoping she would trust his senses. Something was there. As he hoped, she shrank back and shut the door slowly. Zanai, she whispered. In the trees. I think that needs a he said. In the trees, he said. She said nothing. He could feel her terror grow. The heavy air grew cold and felt as though it was sticking to him. He could feel the air like it was a cool lake with monsters in the depths, waiting to consume them the moment they relaxed and began to float. She walked him over to the closet. There was no door on it, so she scooped him up the packs and books that lay on the floor as quietly as she could. She pushed him into the back corner and replaced the items in front of him. Actually, I should add a clarification note here. Stay here, quietly, she said. She walked to the other corner of the room. There were various jackets and implements leaning against the wall that would hide her from being seen as well. They sat in their hiding spots, listening. Screams were accumulating. At first it had seemed like they all came from the south end of town. Now they were surrounded by them on all sides. There were flashes of light, warm light that crackled, fire. Occasionally you saw a flash of bright blue light. Several people in town had lightning source amulets. Capitalized. Either the township was fighting back, or they were being attacked out of the darkness by source casting as an eye. He heard Taryn cries. The lady that lived next door with her daughter began to yell, "No, please, stop." The crackling grew louder. He heard a loud pop and debris hit the front side of his home. "Jump, jump, I got you." Thud. Another scream fueled by pain broke through the other side of chaos. "My leg, we have to go." Cried when I wrote the scene, apparently still crying when I fucking read it. Alright, we have to go. It felt like everything was converging outside of their home. It didn't occur to him that being the house in nearly the center of town, that was exactly what was happening. He sat quietly, drowning in the thick air. There was a roar, not Taryn, not Alara, not Sinai. It was loud and crashed down on his ears so hard it made him feel dizzy. The shoddy. Papa was back and he was fighting. James felt the elation and fear bear down in his chest. He glanced over to his mother's hiding spot. He could not see her, but could feel her position shift. She knew that it was Papa out there too, in the middle of it, saving them or dying trying. She moved out from her spot, moving to grab the sword that Papa had left behind. She was going to join Papa and leave him alone in the darkness. He felt the presence from the woods again. I don't even know how to say this in French, so we're gonna just change it. He felt the presence from the woods again, just outside the back door. Before he could warn his mother, he felt it shift. The shadow weighed down on him, pushing into his mind, and the back door busted inward, shattering to pieces. Shadows seemed to fill the room, flashes of light from outside dimming. He felt his mother's explosive burst of movement as she lunged the final foot toward the sword. She had it in her hand, sheathed as the darkness swallowed her up. Her screams were so oddly far away. The cool air transformed into warm droplets which landed on his face. He was drowning in the warmth of them. He stayed quiet in his corner. He could no longer feel his mother's presence. The sun rose and reality flooded in with it. An endless wave of thick, warm fluid pouring over the boy. His father came inside just before dawn, calling for him. He found him in the closet, scooped him up, and marched him out to his bed. They sat together in silence for a long time. The flickering light of fires dying down came in through the front window. There were no more screams, no more cries, no one begging another to jump out of the window to escape the flames. The sun rose as the light began to fill up the front room of their home, James became aware of the flakes of blood that covered him. The skin on his face was stiff and hard to move. He sat silently, set against his father's chest. Somehow he was crying while not crying at all. The tears streamed down his face, even though he made no noise. An occasional breath would tremble and ache inside of him as he let it out, but he was not crying. Someone knocked on the door. His father, Kingston Cross, the unofficial ruler of Century, walked to the door. Head up, tall, proud, broken inside. Hardy, one of the field hands, appeared as Kingston opened the door. James watched the man shuffle in, seemingly oblivious to the state of the two of them, until he had sat down at the table in the front room. Hardy's eyes met James.
Then they drifted over the boy's face, down to his small, shaking hands. He put the pieces together. "Oh, Kingston," he said quietly. It was all there was to say. "Tell me about the livestock," Papa asked. Party shook his head. "It's nothing we can't handle." He looked from Kingston over to James. "Is there anything you guys need?" Kingston leaned in close to Party and said something James could not hear. The man nodded, then stood to leave. A few minutes later, his father rejoined him, sitting in silence on the bed. James heard people come in the back door, moving around the bedroom. His mother's body was being removed. A nice grave would appear in the back, he knew. They had buried his grandpa there. It would be clean and neat and give away no details about the horrible way his mother had died. All that was left of her was the red stain on the floor in Papa's bedroom. Alright, now it's time to go back through editor's notes. Let's see if there's any she made that I had skipped that I want to make now. Super exciting, I know.
Oh no. Too long between murders. Just going back through and checking all the tedious fun of, well, does this need a fucking period or not? Outside. Alright. That's all the editing line by line notes for chapter 1. How much time do I have on my timer? 21 whole minutes. We could do another chapter. Probably. Maybe. I'm gonna drink some motherfucking tea first, though. I could see 25-minute Pomodoros being effective for editing. I do have it set currently to 45-minute because that's the ideal amount of focus time for us filthy ADHDers. Because it takes longer for us to switch into focus mode, supposedly. And maybe that would be better to have 45 minutes for writing time, maybe 25 for editing. Yep. We are the best, we just, can't sustain being the best for long periods of time because, ooh, there's probably new whispers up to do. Generated halls. Faceless shrine. I'm gonna do one of the ones over here. Less chances of snakes. Hate snakes. I'll give that one a go. But I do need to go before I get distracted by a dungeon. I do need to go, and I'm going to remake my timer. Or, a 25-minute variant, so I've got both. And we'll give that a try for next time. You know, it just occurred to me, there may be command line terminal thing that I can do for just muting my mic globally rather than having to just mute my mic on OBS when I need to cough up a lung or something. Let's see. Is this a reference? Let's see. I hate that OBS does this but doesn't like super clarify. Yeah, that's a reference. I don't want that. Motherfucker. Alright. Jesse, Pomodoro, 25 minutes. I need to make it look nice though. throw the 25-minute one in here. Okay. So I will let this finish out as my break timer, and then I'll get into the next chapter. Forgot that like my prologue opening and like chapter 1 are like 2 of the chapters that were really rough to write. Which is why they're at the fucking beginning, because they're basically a fucking warning to readers. Be like, this is what you're getting into. You ready? You ready? It's not gonna get any better from here. We're just murdering people left and right. Well, not really, but there's a whole lot of death and weird shit. Probably should continue my journey of leveling up my glyphs soon, but the quick, mindless murder where I literally don't have to think because nothing super hurts is kind of nice. Oh yeah, I can switch to the actual reading screen. Pretty sure I don't have the audio coming through for the game on the other screen. Or else I could just keep it all tiny. Alright, so I'm trying to find blood thingies. Alright. Is it? I don't know if my mouse sensitivity is like, because I did jack it up, just making the game like, think I'm like commanding it to go 500 ways at once, and that's why like my character keeps acting like she's tripping over everything, or she is actually tripping over everything. Can't say no to an elite pack. Kind of disappointed that wasn't cursed. You bitches. Oh my goodness. I have cross network play enabled. I had no fucking clue. Yes. Now I can go to the tree and beg for shinies. Drink some more motherfucking tea. I really wish there was like at some point where in Letterkenny when the chick that drinks all the gins and tonics like was drinking tea and said something about like cocksucking tea and tonic or something. Fucking beautiful. That's all I know. Sure. No, I wasn't done looking at that. Blade dancers. Not a great role, but not the worst. Come on. You can do it. Yeah, I think it's just the game. Like, and they're totally not fucked up pathing for all the things.
That looks worn. I can fix it and still use these.
Let's see. Do I have another blade dancers? I do. Actually, the one I just got is like 1% better. 1%. Guess I'll go rip it.
Not in town.
Well, let's have a look.
Alright, so this book, let's ask you people some motherfucking questions. Let's see. It has, I think, 92 chapters, but it's kind of hard to tell in this digital edition. Let me grab a physical one. It's a lot easier to flip to page that was a while ago, or a while in front that way. 89 chapters, so 90 with the prologue, basically. So I want to have this reading done by end of next week, because I should be starting. I need to follow up with her, but with my like story editor, not my line by line editor, in the next couple weeks. So making sure I've got this reread done before we start our editing is my goal. Yeah, I think by next Friday is a good goal. So that means I only have to get through roughly like 13 chapters a day. Okay, that might be a little ambitious. We may need to do like 2 weeks. Anyway, I'm extracting this. That is a lot of chapters. Yeah, I think like 2-week goal would be a little bit more doable, which will leave me at, because I mean that's just going through and making my notes. That's not even counting like actually editing and doing a new version up for like through my formatting software and everything, like out for publishing. So yeah, I think maybe aiming for like 6 or 7 a day would be a little bit more doable. And the more the better, I guess. Alright, got 5 minutes left. Maybe I can finish this faceless dungeon. Bet you this is motherfucking snakes, though. Motherfucking snakes in the motherfucking crypt. It's better than all the motherfucking snakes on the motherfucking plane, though. That's playing with like P-L-A-I-N. Because spelling jokes really go over well. Especially in an audio format only.
Why are we always the ones who get one?
Oh wait, I don't have to murder everyone. Don't have to, but I might just do it anyway.
You saved my life.
The game sounds like really, really quiet to you, too, because they're like super quiet. I don't know if I just like turn them down a little too much at some point. Or if, you know, like, now that I've somewhat fixed my other audio, if like this is lower. Although I should, since I have my own music going. Turn that down a bit. Can I get it out? Yeah! Got that prisoner out before they could stop me. Dirty phrasing, totally.
Bless you.
Conduit? Yeah, conduit. Not even cursed. Alright, where is this other motherfucker? Oh no, I am just going to him. Okay. Alright, gotta find me some blood obelisk. I don't think I'm gonna finish this in like 1 minute 38 seconds. I'm gonna be more focused. Not get distracted by elites and other things.
I need more time.
Okay, come on. Where are you guys hiding your blood envelope? Well, not there. Running by that like 3-pack of elites only hurts a little.
I need more time.
Cursed? Not cursed. Oh, hey. I don't think I can make it to the spot with
Time to do that.
whatever with the shrine, but yeah. Ah, faded just in time for the boss. Alright, we're real close. We'll only be a little bit over on the time since we kind of reversed things there. Alright. So now I'm going to flip this off. I'm going to throw in my 25-minute one. We're going to try that for a rotation to see if it's a little smoother for editing for me. Alright. Let's see. Alright, get ready. 10 seconds. So I've got to read the words. Alright, so let's see. Chapter 2, Shara. 13 years later. Autumn, 82. Oh yeah. I'm gonna drink some tea before I start the other one. Shara moved through the dark and quiet streets of Kryn. She could feel her unknowing mother's disapproval, like a foul gaze on her back. Though she knew that her mother was unaware of her escapades, she could not help but look over her shoulder periodically, to make sure that there was no shadow in the form of her mother, or, more likely, in the shape of one of her mother's many men, soldiers or spies. Ina Shay had eyes all over Kryn. It surprised Shara that she could get out at all without her mother knowing. Shara had changed out of her embroidered silk and velvet dress. She had donned a pair of muslin pants she had bought off a worker that came to see the Shay home. To see the Shay home? I don't know where. I just like threw in that word. Okay. She donned a pair of muslin pants she had bought off a worker that came to the Shay home. They were slightly too large for her, hanging low and beckoning forward from the weight of the metal buttons. Shara had left the button-up shirt free at the bottom to hide the way her pants fell forward as she walked near the shadowed brick wall that opened from an alley onto the main street. She played with the edges of the oversized shirt, twisting it tight, then remembered the gap between her skin and the waistband of the pants she was openly exposing. She dropped the shirt, smoothed it out, as she would one of her dresses when she stood from sitting after a long States dinner at the States house that her mother made the family's own. John was often late, so Shara forced herself to maintain a slow pace as she moved toward the meeting spot. She was usually early. It was the curse of their outings. Shara doomed herself to wait and worked herself up into a ball of anxiety before John came sauntering down the street. He was her guide. The underground was a maze of collapsed sewers, train tracks, and subway stations. Topsiders that went into the underground without a guide rarely came out again. Not only was the underground wet, dirty, and sure to ruin any beautiful piece of clothing, but nice clothes would make a topsider sneak out. Blending in wasn't just necessary for Shara to enjoy the evening, but also for her to survive it. She measured each step in her mind as it echoed in the empty streets. Spate's buildings were a short walk up the road to the left. Straight ahead of the alley in which Shara walked, the looming buildings blocked out the stars behind them. The largest buildings lay there, near to State's buildings, at the center of Prynne, and next to the heart of all they had built since Prynne's establishment 80 years ago, sat the Nagata. Side note, totally named after Naomi Nagata from The Expanse. It got a name change during edits. It dwarfed all the buildings. The old generation ship had crashed down from orbit when the sundering had happened and had not moved since. The old hunk of metal and ceramic reflected the stars dully. The original settlers of Prynne stripped her of her... Oh my gosh. The original settlers of Prynne stripped her of most of her panels and innards and put them to use elsewhere. They had created half the cobblestones that formed the main street from the ceramic reentry panels. The founding Alara of Prynne had forged the other half and the bindings between them with source, reshaping the red rocks of the surrounding land into cobblestones. The merging of technology that the Terrans aboard the Nagata brought with them, augmented by the source the Alara had brought to Centera, had formed so much of Prynne. Without a spaceport or the means to climb around the Nagata with ease, the Alara had manipulated the trees and stones. Where most of the Nagata's missing panels were on the east side of the ship, carefully forged rock rose and intertwined with trees and vines to form scaffolding made entirely of natural elements. Workers had then scaled the Alara's scaffolding to rip pieces off the ship. Initially, the parts had been used to construct buildings and fortifications for the fledgling town, but even those original buildings had been gutted and reconstructed repeatedly. The Nagata outpost had become a vast farming community before it condensed itself back down to what it was today, the most significant settlement of survivors of the Sundering. There were other settlements, somewhere nearby. Most of them were still farming communities. There were rumors of a few along the east coast. Seafield, the mercenary town, was well established in the southern swamplands. What little data came over the satellite network verified that there were a few communities in what had been Europe. Praha and Roubaix sent updates to her mother occasionally. There had been discussions about rebuilding long-distance travel options, but when it came down to working on them, it quickly became clear that Prynne was the only location that had enough stability to develop luxuries beyond basic survival. And with the Zenai army heading toward them, that luxury was fading quickly. Neither colony in Europe had enough to offer Prynne to trade to justify the work Prynne would have to put in to get functioning aeroplanes. Shara did not let these facts get in her imagination's way. She had spent hours on her father's lap looking at his light tab with him. Praha was her favorite. The Gothic architecture, the spires, the feel of the place spoke to her. She wanted to go there. She imagined that someday she would, and that would be where she'd meet her husband. Inevitably, her marriage would be political, just as her grandmother's had been, just as her mother's had been. But from duty had sprung a deep well of love between her parents. And Shara figured any multinational political union could also be filled with love. It started in a place like Praha. Praha and Roubaix had inspired her father in their own way. His political career took a turn into city planning not long after he had married Ina. This had led to Prin's main corridor being filled with buildings that spoke of European inspiration, from the cathedrals of Old London to the bulbous spires of Russia. The central state building, where her mother kept offices, was inspired by a famous structure in a place in the old world called Tehran. Shara could see the shadow of its upside-down V off in the distance. The base of the shape swirled in concentric circles that swept up into grand ramps and stairways behind, branching off to various floors. It had taken her father nearly 30 years to build the state's house. They had used up the last of the materials that Nagata had to print her own repair parts. In the night, it looked like a bulb of darkness that came to a sudden point. Shara turned her back to the building and headed toward the shanties. As more and more of the outskirts of Prin encountered problems, those that were not beholden to the fields or cattle had come to Prin for shelter and security. Prin had to make do. The underground had flourished in the past few years. It was this growth that led Shara to this alley tonight. Along with the masses of people that filled every livable corner of the various structures of Prin, had come layers of culture. They performed spoken word stories and poetry a few times a month, and Shara snuck out of her highly guarded home and her shabbiest clothing to attend. These were nice when she was not the half-breed daughter of the most prominent political couple in Prin. She was not the first Inari. She was not the piece of Prin, and she was not responsible for these people, but one of them. She savored each moment. Tea time. She ran her head along the last of the stone buildings as they gave way to the fallen buildings. Need to figure out one of these to reword. She ran her hand along the last of the stone buildings. They gave way to the fallen buildings that had never been rebuilt after their sundering, and had still been made into homes. Residents had thrown up tarps and planks of wood where they could to segment off areas of the buildings as their own. Small fires they made for warmth were visible, flickering in between the gaps in their privacy. Shara walked on for another minute, coming to the barricade that desperate people pushed aside long ago when the sky shattered above them. She walked between the concrete barriers that came up to her waist, up to the doors of the underground, and stepped over the broken glass as she ducked through the metal frame. She paused for just a moment at the top of the metal staircase before she spied a shadow at the bottom move unexpectedly. Excitement rose in her as a light blossomed in the darkness below, but she still leaned against the side of the stairs as she waited. As it came closer, John's form became clear. Shara pushed herself off the rubber railing and moved down the stairs towards him when he brought his hand up in a stop motion. He shook his head at her. No? Why not? He looked back over his shoulder before darting out of the shadows and up the metal stairs to meet her. The artificers had moved against the bloodsmiths. No meeting tonight. She opened her mouth to protest that there must be something to do in the underground tonight, but she could feel disapproval radiating off of him, along with fear. His words sunk in. Is there anything we can do to help? She asked, even though she knew the question itself betrayed how entrenched she was as a topsider. Yeah, he said. Stay the fuck away. He turned on his heel and darted back across the street. Did I actually start my... I did start my timer this time. Okay. It had always been the Shea family. As she turned to retreat from her failed night underground, Shara shivered at the cold, or perhaps at the thought of ruling. Her mind once again turned to the thought of a political marriage, but without the tinge of romance Despite the limits of her Terran perception, Ina Shea was in tune with people in a way that cast a shadow over the abilities of her Alara husband and stepchildren, and far surpassed Shara's own Inari abilities to sense people. Ina was a born mother, and so she mothered an entire city of survivors. Shara never wanted children of her own, let alone a city of people to serve as if they were her children. As Shara stepped through the doorframe out into the streets of Prin, she kicked a piece of the shattered glass. Shara meandered down the streets before turning towards the circular streets that made up the state's house. So I've said streets like 5 times. Alright, Shara meandered down the streets before turning towards the circular streets that made up the state's house neighborhood. As all the eligible bachelors in the ranks of the pact came to mind, she wondered if she could forge a loving marriage with any of them. She took a sharp left and decided she would not head home. She would go see Haffy, general of the pact army, and the confidant of both herself and her mother. Stone walls gave way again to small buildings. Haffy's own house was a well-kept squat unit. She came to the crimson door she knew so well and knocked. As the door swung open, Happy's concerned look melted into a smile, and he swept Shara into a hug, enveloping her in his large frame. "What are you doing out here so late, little princess?" he asked as he sat her back down. She laughed. "I was supposed to be at a poetry reading tonight in the underground, but it was canceled." He didn't miss a beat. Fighting in the underground again. That is a lot of trouble for people who have no credits on either faction. The slight frown on his face turned into a small smile as he took a half step back and asked in a conspiratorial tone, "Were you heading to the place with the good sangria?" Shara smiled back at him, the same smile she had given him since he began training her 10 years ago. And she kept her silence as she leaned over and propped herself up on the doorframe. He laughed, the same laugh he gave her when her antics amused him. He had not broken her trust in the past, and he wouldn't break it now. Her mother found out about her excursion in the morning, and Happy would be the first person who Ina would complain to about it, and he would still keep her secret. Tonight, he was Shara's general, not her mother's. It's not like sangria is in a good state right now anyway. Since trade with the western towns is increasingly difficult, fruit choices are more limited, she replied. At this, he threw his head back and laughed loudly as he began to turn and retreat into the house. Figures you would pay attention to trade issue when it affects getting good fucking sangria. Shara brushed past him into the living room, giving him a shrug as she turned and dropped herself onto the couch. A girl has to have priorities. Happy sat in his winged armchair and looked her over. He could never turn off his guardian mode entirely, and she felt his eyes appraising her for wounds or any evidence that she had gotten close to the fighting. She felt him relax back into the chair when his search revealed that she was unscathed. She donned her girlish smile again. "Did you finish aging the whiskey Mom sent you?" When he responded with a raised eyebrow, she shamelessly broadened her smile to the point of ridiculousness. He grunted his disapproval, but got up from his chair. She followed him into the kitchen, where leftovers sat on the counter from her quick meal. Roasted fowl he had half shredded, half sliced into thick slabs. "I must see if I can get my hands on some new flowers that came in. I overheard the cook saying that one was the right weight to make a good pasta," she offered. Happy handed her a short glass with a few ounces of amber fluid. "It's been a while since I have had a pasta." That would be an acceptable payment for this. Enough flour for 2 weeks' worth of pasta, since, that's how long I take to age this stuff. He poured himself a glass, swirled it under his nose, and smiled. This would go well with a good bolognese sauce. Pity to waste it on sangria lovers who can't appreciate the complexity of flavors. I may not appreciate it fully, but I listened to Dad droning on after he made you the cast, something about the dark and peaty flavor that would come from the wood, and without me, you'd have nothing to put your pasta sauce on. She took a sip and was careful not to wrinkle her nose. What the hell does peaty mean, anyway? For the pathetically uneducated, it is a salty and smoky flavor, and despite your father's brilliant attempts to season the wood with flavors, this really is sad compared to the real stuff. She rolled her eyes at the barb and smiled. I must ask Dad to make you a second flask with the least peaty finish for my uneducated palate. How would you know what the real stuff tastes like? Happy grunted. Ha. Seafield lives on salvaging. 80 years is nothing for a properly sealed bottle of scotch. They last. The hall was filled with treasures like real old Terra scotch. The hall, you never told me of this glorious place. It's like a museum, except the guild uses everything in it for payment for jobs. Shara opened her mouth to ask about the guild, only to get a glare from Happy. That's enough of that. Dark tones and quick words always ended every discussion Shara tried to create with Happy about his mercenary days. So she turned and walked back to the living room, where she sprawled out on the couch again, half upright, to continue drinking. She watched the liquid shift in transparency as various sources of light around the room filtered through while she sipped it. Happy, I know things aren't going well. Mom only works so late when there is a problem. Is it the Zanai? Happy took another sip and started eyeing her protectively again. After a moment, he sighed and took a large gulp of his whiskey. Yes. We lost the canyon this week, and the half of the army that was in the pass, completely cut off. We are mustering everyone we can with the conscription clause to go out there and defend the edges of the pass before any Zanai get to Prin. The Zanai horde so close to Prin, Shara squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. The black behind her lids seemed to swirl like the smoke barrier that surrounded each Zanai. She could almost see Prin, her home, enveloped in it. No wonder her mother was so busy. The sorghum? Happy gave her a nod and took another sip. She probably had a she asked there. The sorghum, she asked. Happy gave her a nod and took another sip. Despite its hardy nature and that Prin could have used the full harvest, Ina had elected to send almost all their usable sorghum to the southwest because of the settlements over the mountains' lack of crops. They had hunted most species to near extinction and had almost nothing to eat besides a small handful of forage food. Ina made them a deal. They would send half of their harvest to Prin, along with recruits for the packed army. Every young person between the ages of 17 and 25. Despite the lower yield, the sorghum saved the people on the other side of the mountain and provided Prin with enough of two different needed resources over the summer. The agreement was a sore spot for many of Prin's leaders, given how indefensible the settlements were. If the Zanai ever attacked them, Prin would lose all their yield from their crops, and that's precisely what had just happened. Ina would face the backlash from the other leaders who didn't care about the people she had saved, or that she had mustered up more soldiers for the army when Prin needed soldiers most. How many died? Shara asked. We aren't sure if they are all gone, but we haven't been able to contact anyone that was stationed there. Aaron Shriver sent us a message on the satnet before we lost contact with him, too. Aaron had been a few classes ahead of Shara in her school days, and given her age, she felt safe in assuming he was probably pretty far down the command chain. That was not a good sign. She glanced at Happy, who sat staring at the last drops of whiskey in his glass. His eyes flashed with sadness and anger. We are deploying the whole packed army in a few weeks. Everyone but the Prin Guard. I'll be staying a little longer to recruit where I can. There are a lot of people on either side of the conscription age bracket that we could really use. Shara took a sip, feeling the cloud of shadow over both of their thoughts filling the room. You won't get many, maybe, not any. She swirled the liquid around and glared at it, only slightly aware that her and Haffy looked like mirror images. We can't keep doing this, Haffy. These aren't little skirmishes of our men and a handful of Zanai anymore. This is a real war. The only allies we have close to us are Sentry. And you know Kingston Cross isn't willingly going to bring his people here to be conscripted. Even if he did, there aren't enough of them to make much of a difference. We have to win something. Have you talked to her about letting... I talked to her about it every goddamn week, Shara. But you know how it goes. Your mother won't agree unless everyone else is dead, including me. And even then, you'll have a harder time fighting her than Miss and I. She is a stubborn, jam-packed prepping for a death roll. Shara swallowed a smile that threatened to take over her face. Schools of Quinn have never thought it important to teach the kids about swamp creatures around Seaport. Shara never asked what they were like. It seemed more fun to imagine the craziest beasts that her mind could conjure. Putting on her grim stare again, she continued, and had to convince her. You convince her. I've been trying for 3 years, Princess, and warning her she'd have to face that day for 7 more years. The day I started training you, I told her this would come, eventually. I can't convince her either. She's always bringing up the cave and how I needed to be rescued. Happy let himself show a slow but sad smile. She does the same with me, no matter how many times I remind her that it was you who saved my life in the end. Shara shifted lower onto the couch, resting her neck on the arm as she let her mind wander. Thoughts slipped over her at different angles, and she spun them around, contemplating the way forward and what few tools she had at her disposal. She held the drink by the brim of the glass as she moved in a circle, sloshing the last sip of amber fluid in the bottom of the sides. She let her hands drift down to her lap, rebalancing the glass between them both. She could almost see it, the full thought, the first one in a plan, was right in front of her, but still in a bunch of unconnected pieces. You have the same look as your mother. You even mouth words to yourself like she does when she's coming up with something. What horrible idea are you thinking? Happy asked. It took a moment for her brain to shift from the forming image to process the words that Happy had said. It's just the start of an idea. I'll let you know when it solidifies. Happy stood. Yes, you will tell me before you do anything. I agree that we need to convince her. But you running off and being a bull-headed dumbass won't help. He stood and took her glass from her hands, downing the last of the drink before taking the cups back to the kitchen. Shara let her mind wander down each path of the problem. She wasn't aware of the small living room anymore as her thoughts took her away. Let's see. 4 minutes until break time? Alright, we'll see how much I can get done of editor's notes. Ah. Apparently the 25 minutes is too much. Getting the disconnects. Alright. Oh no, there's two now. Is this actually the break timer, or is it counting down to the break? Like, did I miss it transitioning from focus to break? Apparently there's no fucking sound. Or I forgot to set it on monitor. That may be part of the issue. So I don't remember hearing that before too. Yeah, okay. Yeah, see, it just switched to focus time, so apparently a 30-minute time is still a little too short. Maybe I'll try a 35-minute timer to get through one chapter at a time. I mean, the long ones go up to like 4,000 words in a chapter, but they average around 2,000, like 2,500. I'll get the timer right someday. Alright, let's see if we can edit this actually. Because, I mean, in theory, all the variables are just right here. So breaks 5, focus 25. So let's bump that up to 35 and do a 10-minute break. Let's see if that actually does what I wanted it to do. Yeah, okay, cool. I'm actually gonna turn that off for now. No, you're supposed to refresh when I turn you on. There we go. I'm going to take a short break and run to the restroom, do a dungeon, and then we'll start again with the 35-minute focus timer. Until I forgot to restart my bot again.
Not in town.
Oh my god. I don't think my bot saved my config when I restarted for my WebSockets. There we go.
Hit your tits and pucker up. It's time to peel the paint.
Is that a decent volume for you? Because that was like super quiet for me. At least compared to my music. Which you probably can't hear now. Alright, now that I have both, I'm going to wait for a song to pick back up because this is the end of one, and then we'll see how the volume is for the tit hitching. Gonna throw in a hitch.
Hit your tits and pucker up. It's time to peel the paint.
How is that balance-wise? Okay.
Like a couple of donkey balls.
Not in town.
Music down a sea air. Let me see if I happen to have this in my sigil. I do. Of course, I didn't even fucking look at it. Why are you not letting me teleport? I mean, I'm close enough, don't let me teleport. Have to run like 5 feet. This game sucks. Literally unplayable. This is a lightning storm one. What other affixes do I have? And backstabbers. Probably should have read this before I popped it. It's also a 48, so it's a little ouchy. Oh, fuck balls, I'm eating a sausage! This lightning storm has no respect for the sausage. I really need to add like some visual indicator to that, so like you know if you're in the field, instead of just being like you can only get to like the edge or something, like just praying to God and being like, hopefully I'm in it. Not like it would change the mechanic. It would just, you know, let you be warned of your impending death like that. Why did it spawn way the fuck back there? I murdered everything. There was nothing there. Kind of forgetting this is definitely out of the like hit things with like one ability and they fall over territory. Yeah, right during my rogue proc, dude. This poor lightning storm. It's like literally like playing a healer. Where, like, it's technically saving your life, even though it's also technically killing you. But it gets no fucking thanks for saving your life. You're just, like, cursing it out because it's inconveniently saving your life. Sorry, little healer's lightning storm, buddy. I'm sorry, I'm so mean to you, but I still fucking hate you. Yeah, we doing this? Alright. No! What you doing over there, tricky little thing? Hey, Morham, what level is your baby rogue? Oh, wait, I'm in an immunity bubble. Don't have to worry about your shit anymore, Lightning Storm. $52? I thought you were 60-something. Maybe 62? Because, yeah, you were able to equip Ancestral, weren't you?
I can't do that here. It is done.
Want to listen ad-free, download music offline, and keep songs playing in the background? Get YouTube Music Premium.
Bitches. Oh wait, that's not where I had the fucking... Oh my god.
I can't do that here.
Where's the fucking music? I put it in Chrome, huh? Here we go. It did. Switch us over to a new track. Which I guess isn't too bad if that's the only ad that's played.
Not in town.
Still not happy about it, but you know.
The forge is ready. Whatever. I can break that down. The forge is always hot.
Alright. I don't know how long that took me, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start the next reading timer, and we'll see if the 35-25 split works better for me. There we go. Countdown. I'm gonna do a read. Let's see, is this thing charged? Yeah, it's at 77%. I didn't finish, that's why I was back there. I didn't finish going through the editor notes. I don't even remember where it was. So this is... There we go. Okay. Found where I was at. Is this a fucking Game of Thrones song? From the Sub to Baylor episode? If not, it's real fucking close. Yeah, this is definitely, if not from Game of Thrones, it's someone's like rendition of it. Hey, Talonvor, how's it going? Pretty good yourself. Nice, tanked your first 20. Ooh, Underrot too. Yeah, all I've got so far is my freehold. I've been wanting to go for an Underrot soon. But, you know. That is a little bit difficult sometimes, especially when I barely log on to 2 keys. Yeah, I figured Underrot would probably be the next best one. Shishui? There's another WME monk? Oh my god, there's 2 of us? Nice. Yeah, I really need to get on and like push for some more 20s. I just haven't felt like it. And I really need to do a bunch of keys this season because my... Well, not this season. This week. Wow, brain. Just because my tyrannicals are between like 15 and like 17, I think, for almost all of them. I think I've got like 1 or 2 18 or 19s for tyrannical, but that's it. This whole month of August, I think I should be leveling alt. The only alt I have to level is my fucking rogue. And like, I refuse to level a rogue solo. Because I will only want to do dungeons, because world leveling and soloing, I hate. At least on a rogue. I'm working weekly. Several classes of dwarves and pandas left, huh? What is the stay classy achieve for guilds? Nice. Yeah, I've got literally everything at 70 right now except for my fucking rogue. And that's because I hate leveling rogue solo. Yeah, I just need a pocket tank and a pocket healer so they can just, you know, churn out the dungeons for me, and then I'll have a 70 rogue too. Nice. Well, I can't heal on a rogue. I mean, I guess I could, like, see if I can buy some bandages. I'll be over there, like, backstabbing shit, and then I'll run over to you and just hit bandage, which will probably take, like, once. But it'll help. Yeah, I love link keys. I mean, you're also welcome to be my pocket tank for, like, keys and stuff or other healer and tank needed things, but... Nice. It could tank for like 6 more levels. Or whenever it is they punt you into like the dragon stuff and don't give you a choice. Shitty 61 rogue. Yeah, like I enjoy the like pure damage spec classes. Where you've got like the 3 different options and playing around with them. But man, the like utility of just being able to be like, I'm gonna queue this healer a tank right now. I miss that. Yeah, every time I've like started leveling a rogue, like I enjoy them as a class. Yeah, WoW rogue, not D4 rogue, obviously. But yeah. Well, I mean, you could look at my D4 rogues to see why I don't ever finish leveling them in WoW. It's because D4 rogues, you can fucking build to be tanky and just like jump at things and shank them a bunch of times. When like WoW rogues, you like something looks at you instead of the tank and you're just falling over. Oh, it's D4 in the background, editing stuff in the foreground because I'm supposed to be being productive and doing editing stuff. A way to distract me, Talonvora. Tal. I don't know what people call you. I'll go with Tal because it doesn't quite sound like I'm just calling you tall, like you fucking tall person. I mean, granted, it doesn't take much because I'm over here with like ADHD brain just being like squirrel. But yeah. Let's see. Alright, so you do want me to just call you tall, like fucking tall person. Yes, so this is my first book in this series. I'm going into 3rd round of edits with my like story editor. So she's not like line by line. She helps me like make sure the story has a good arc and like all that fun stuff for book 2. And I'm doing rough drafting for book 3, so I figured now is a good time to go back to book 1 and read through it and make sure like I'm not missing anything huge or, you know, consistency sort of read through, I guess, for the most part. But then there are a few line by line edits from my other editor that I'm trying to squeeze in while I'm doing this read through. So basically I'm reading through chapter, then going back and doing the line by line edits. It's super exciting. Hmm. 10 years is a long time. What time is it anyway? I do have to end early today, and I have no idea what time it is. We'll check it from Diablo. 1:38. Okay. I've got like an hour and 20 minutes still. Alright. See, 3 minutes of focus time left. But I'm at the next chapter, so I guess chapter 3 will be here. Alright, what we got here? 35 minutes. You can make that work. And I've been here, I just was doing work. Now I'm gonna do murder. Many murders. Hydrate along with the murders. What, you don't believe me that I'll do many murders? Have you never watched my stream before? Oh my god, fucking horse. Okay, well, it's good you believe that part. Yep, no proof at all. I could have been, like, colonizing Mars or something. I definitely was not here.
I beg you.
Yes, I may or may not have, like, proto-molecule dates or something. You need shit when you've got proto-molecule that tries to make people into machines. What could go wrong? Although I guess I shouldn't talk about the Expanse. From what I understand, you still haven't fucking watched it. You could be watching it right now. This is allowed for now. But I mean, you could burn through all of the Expanse show-wise anyway before Ahsoka comes out. At least last I knew there wasn't a date for Ahsoka, but it should be like end of this year. last quarter-ish. I mean, I have a thing for that. Maybe.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Rebels is good, but it's also like... It's good in the same way that Clone Wars is good, where like there's some really fucking good episodes that have like meaning to like the overall Star Wars universe. And then there's a lot of episodes that just don't. I'd say they slimmed it down a little bit. Like Clone Wars had a lot more of the fluff than Rebels does, but it's kind of the same. Well, it's not even that they're bad episodes, it's just, you know, they literally mean nothing in the grand scheme of things, other than, you know, everyone loves a Lothcat. Lothcat?
I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, that's true. It does. It starts out very kid showsy, and then it gets a little bit more. Shit's getting real, yeah. Oh my god, dog. Get out of my armpit. I'll I may need to take him out soon. He's giving me little shoulder nudges. And it's adorable, but it usually means he needs her once. We should do keys, except that with like my work timer thing, I'll run out of break time before the key is over. Time walking on a bunch of things. Where the fuck did they hide the fucking dead people that I need to find the keys? Why do they keep the keys on the dead people? And it's not like they don't use the laboratory. They're inside the laboratory. Why wouldn't they have already found the key? Heh 56 barb, huh? I mean, yeah, you can come do some dungeons on your 56 barb. Just like remix number 2 in the same YouTube video of the fucking Game of Thrones song. I think it is. I'm gonna switch some music shit up right now. "48 hours of epic battle music. We're gonna give this a fucking try.
Introducing Orby-Wine.
Better be real fucking nice. Must be real fucking nice. 19 minutes and 30 seconds left. And let's see, it's 2:03, so I've probably got like one more productivity round in me for today, and then I'm gonna have to log out because I gotta go physically to meet people. It's pretty much the worst thing in the universe these days. Yeah. It's super gross. Mostly on my end though, because I'm like, who even wears makeup anymore? Like, is that a thing? Even though, you know, my 14-year-old daughter assures me it still is. Streamed your key last night. I know I don't have my camera on today, but most days I do. I haven't been fucking wearing makeup, so it's not glaringly obvious, and I think I'm doing okay. And if it is glaringly obvious, you can tell me. Yeah, I'll tell you to go fuck yourself, so you can still say it. Under about 20 feet. Ow. That's a good name. They do have auto accepts for joins enabled. But I will see if I can there we go. Don't bother coming to this one though, because the just finished it. Let me figure out which one's next. Sealed archives. Oh, I hate the archive ones. It's always ghosts. You know what? Fuck it. Let's do charge it, guys. We'll go to Alderwood. Yeah, it took me a little while to get the D3 group systems a little bit different. Because, yeah, like, not only do you not have to be party leader to invite people, you can also just have people join on you if you enable it in settings. Which is fun. I just, like, ninja sneak into people's parties. Be like, oh hey, I heard there was murdering here. Okay, if you want to just port to me, I'd send in. Alright. We'll see how long the murder hoboing takes. If I need to, I can just go hunt the Alderkin down. But maybe kill you. I don't know how you're doing gear and survivability wise. I mean, if you want to stay back and out of combat, then I'll probably just do objectives. That's up to you. I know that gets boring for, like, being the carry. Everyone likes to shank things. Well, I mean, if you could greedy and die and then lose that on experience, that sucks. I won't even feel bad. Yeah, I did. It wasn't this one. What's the other one? Like, all guilty with animals. I don't know. But I did that one. It was like, cold enchanted with all the thorn beasts. It wasn't even like super high level. It was like a fucking like 42, but like they just fucking chain froze me from range. Like I never even got to hit the fucking elite pack of like 3 of those fucking icy stupid thorn beasts. And terrible. So I ended up just like I was still able to complete the objectives because it wasn't like play all in that piece, but I was like so over this. Like that pack is just gonna stay in that corner, die of starvation because I'll burn everything else to the ground. We do have to travel back to the last area. Oh well. Ooh, goblin. Maybe look at the butcher too. have the urge to make sure the butcher isn't. I mean, I guess this isn't a nightmare dungeon. Maybe they don't come hand in hand. Found the boss, huh? Alright, no butcher over this way. I guess we can go murder the actual boss now. Finish whispers for me. Go talk to my head tree. Yeah, I did not murder them all. I just murdered enough to make the rest shit their pants. Alright, let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, I was gonna do archive, lost key. Sure, we'll see what's there. Next to a dungeon I still haven't done. I wonder how many I am missing out of the codex. It's gotta only be like 2 or 3 at this point. Okay, 6. Okay, whatever this one is, hopefully not a slay all objective. I'm gonna like be trying to speed run it because we've only got 13 minutes to get the whispers from it. Oh, and my break's only supposed to be 4 minutes and 30 more seconds. You can teleport to me once it lets you. Alright, well you can pop in. Well, no, because then I'll be in the middle of things. Okay. Yeah, if you want to run some keys tonight, I may be able to get on. It'll depend on the tiny human. But if not, I definitely want to get some done over the weekend. All right. Pretty much only going to stop protecting the and objectives. If I find any. Just say like every time I play. I see those ghost archers got you pretty quick. Yep, I totally just called in a hit on you. What am I missing? Ah, I missed a little right up there. Well, at least I get to go loot this. Even though it's gone to my stash anyway. There you are, Pendo. Looting in combat is the typical rogue. Oh, yeah, calling it a hit on you. Also typical rogue. Animus collection. Oh, I got this actually pick up all these. Not an animus guy, but a nice little collection. channeling shrine. Maybe curse? Not a curse. Woohoo. I like it. Oh, there was another banner. God damn it. So excited about the murders. But you just... Nope, not cursed either. I don't understand what's happening right now. Boss time. Alright. Well, that is it for my break time murder. So I'll be reading my next chapter of fun and excitement. Trying not to kick my dog that moved my footstool, because I was going for the footstool. Yeah, no problem. Tall motherfucker. Alright. Totally gonna go be productive. I'm gonna have to restart my timer though. I'm at 5 minutes over. 5, 4. I don't know if I have this to reset. Yeah, I do. Okay. Alright, let's see. Chapter 3. Ina. It always came down to numbers, data, and logistics. Ina Shea was not sure how she ended up here. This was not at all what she had intended when she got into politics. Of course, it ran in the family to be politicians. Her mother, Mara, and her father, Shannon, had been pillars of the Terran community before they had built the State House. Which actually, that should have a clarification note. Before they had built the original State's House. They had lived through tragedy. The Sundering had torn the world. Sundering had torn the worlds as they knew them into pieces and put them back together like some surreal piece of artwork that had an echo of horror, but mostly just chaos. Both her parents had ran to the gates together, strange pinpoints of light that most people ran away from, had collected a few that walked right into them. Those few that reached the gates in time had survived. With the remnants near where the Nagata had crashed, those Terran survivors had started the community that had become Terran. joined soon by the strange alarm. Ina was here because she carried the torch, sure, but she was ultimately here because she cared. Born into chaos, grown into order, and built up from nothing, she and Prin had many things in common, and her love for the place went deeper than anyone fully understood. Fuck no, we will not use the Hill Tribes as bait, she spat. A dozen mouths around the table stilled. The room looked at her, holding its breath. She could hear the arguments they were spooling up in their minds. Every single one would come down to one point. Sacrificing the Hill Tribes would give them the greatest chance of survival and the lowest amount of deaths. No way in fucking hell we are just going to leave them to die with no warning. Ina turned to Haffy, the general she had brought to power precisely for his brutal problem solving. Is there any way to use the settlements as bait after we evacuate the people? Haffy shook his head. The Zanai scouts are in full view of the settlements. Any movement or attempt to evacuate will raise flags. How long will it take the Zanai command to take action if we start an evacuation? Minutes to put a plan into place? A few hours at most before they hit the evacuation. That should... I think evacuees may make better there. More sense there. Alright. A few hours at most before they hit the evacuees. We can use their normal daily activities to evacuate some people during the day, then start a full evacuation near the end of the day. Ambush the scouts before they can get the word out that we are there for the evacuees. Once your men are in place, you start the evacuation. Haffy opened his mouth to protest, and already had a raised eyebrow pointed at him. He closed his mouth and nodded. You'll need about a day to get in position and lay some traps without being seen. Ina gave a curt nod in his direction as she turned towards her aide, standing at the... Ina gave a curt nod in his direction as she turned toward her aide, who was standing at the door. Let me know when you get the last person safely into Prin. She turned her head an inch to the side to look at the boy. Bring me some fucking coffee. The sudden shift of her gaze startled the poor kid. His eyes grew wide, he jumped to his feet and fumbled with the door while mumbling something that ended with "ma'am," before bolting through the doorway toward the State's House kitchen. The door to her office clicked shut. Ina turned on her heel and gave a wide gesture with her arm towards the door to signal to the other observers that the meeting was over. They all stood, eyes scanning the room for anyone else willing to change her mind. No one made the move, and so they formed a line to leave the room. Everyone except Damon Decro. He stood in his usual casual manner, his tall frame always somehow looking like it was leaning up against something even when he was standing straight. He kept his eyes firmly down the table ahead of him. As each other member of the council filed past him, they looked away. They all knew, just as she did, that the Pact Army recently conscripted his son. He was just a year older than Shara. Happy, Ina met his eyes and nodded back towards the blackboard wall covered in chalk drawings. He stayed while the room emptied. Ina walked over to where Demon stood, at the end of the table, still not moving to leave, and still not looking or saying anything to her. Looking at or saying anything to her maybe will flow smoother. And still not looking at or saying anything to her. She did the only thing she could. She reached across the table and put a hand over his, and she lied. I know, Demon. We have all been where you are, or we will be soon. He looked up at her, surprise on his face. She could see the question in his eyes of whether she would allow Shara to be sent when she turned 17, a question she often asked herself. She smiled and nodded, giving his hand a small squeeze. He seemed to accept her implied promise that she would send Shara, and he nodded back to her and turned to leave the room. Maybe. turned to leave the room. As the door shut behind him, Ina sat down with a heavy sigh. I don't know how to do this, Happy. How do I choose who lives and who dies? Against all logic, I've made a call that sentences your kids to death rather than a few farmers in a small mountain pass. Is it justifiable just because your soldiers agreed to some terms when they moved here, or their parents did anyway? Happy sat and placed his hand on top of hers. You don't decide who dies. You don't decide who lives. You decide what matters to those of us who lose sight of it. He waved at the chalk on the wall behind them. We all see strategy. You see people. We all want to win. You alone know what isn't worth losing. Ina smiled down at the table. Thanks. I needed someone to make up emotional bullshit to keep me going. That's what I am good at. She laughed. It is good I didn't meet you until I was about to have you killed. This entire city might not exist otherwise. He winked. I've never forgiven you for nearly sending me to the grave, but at least I am badass enough to change your mind, you stubborn bitch. Ina threw her head back and laughed. As the moment tapered off, she reached over and squeezed Happy's hand. You mean, luckily, you were useful enough to change my mind. But now I need to figure out all the other ways Prim could fall apart. She tapped the tabletop, which lit up in response to her fingerprint. She began shuffling through documents too classified for even Happy to see, knowing that he would take the hint. The door swung open, and her aide shuffled in. He placed the coffee pot in the center of the table, glanced at her, then bolted back out of the room to his desk. Happy chuckled as he stood and moved towards the door. If you're not careful, that boy will need to be potty trained again. Ina smiled, but didn't look up from the pages of text. I'll call his mother. Ina burst into the study that her husband kept meticulously clean. From outside the room, she had heard the light strum of the guitar. She crashed through the doors. She'd intended to walk lightly through so as not to interrupt her. But often her inner turmoil burst out of her, no matter her best intentions. He sat in his corner in a deep forest green high-backed chair, surrounded by shelves of books. Most of his library had been salvaged and covered such a wide variety of topics, there was no way he could ever consume all of it. He kept them for the house, believing that someday the books would be needed by someone in the city. Most seemed too arcane or filled with old... That should be Terra. Old Terra to be of much use. Sure, maybe someone would pick up that electrical engineering textbook, but outside of the basics of circuitry and soldering, many things in print were different. Their primary means of manufacturing was through the dimension bots. Feed them any blueprint, and they could print it out, sometimes in minutes, sometimes in days. There was little to no need to wire anything up, let alone use resistors or capacitors as the old books talked about. The machines printed materials with the needed levels of connectivity, or could create amalgams on the fly. On a table in front of her husband was a spread of tools he had recently used to change the strings of his guitar. Guitar strings were one of their luxuries. They had been rewound from various scraps scavenged from the world around them. Joe complained about this fact often, the way it changed the tone of the guitar, and how they so easily fell out of tune. It was easy to forget how many people had never seen a guitar, much less held one, or learned to play one. Ina raised a hand, palm up, and shrugged an apology when Joe looked up, startled by her explosive entrance. He smiled and placed the guitar in its stand next to the armchair. She picked off her shoes and walked across the worn Persian rug, another salvage, until she was close enough to collapse into his lap, pulling her knees up to her chest as she wrapped an arm around his neck and leaned into him. She sighed contentedly, letting the day slide off of her. Your ass is so bony, Joe mumbled, shifting underneath her until he found the right angle to avoid her bones digging into his legs. She lifted her ass. She lifted her ass. She lifted her head and looked at him with a mischievous, unapologetic smile, then rested her head against him again. Joe chuckled. Rough day? Her rough days were the days she brought home her fury, which quickly dissipated into dark humor and playfulness, with Joe or the girls.
Joe could never drop his anger and frustration completely, which is why he had retired from the eye of the public nearly as soon as Ina and him had married. Without the worries of a newborn city and its survival, he was calm and collected and hard to ruffle. It suited them to be such a pair, the woman who never stumbled for long, and the man who stayed level-headed in the background. Joe Trill Shay, her voice rang out in sharp, stern tones before dropping into a sigh. Every day is a rough fucking day, she muttered into his chest. He rubbed her shoulder softly and waited for her to continue. Sometimes she did, and sometimes she didn't. We've had to start evacuations along the Cascade Line settlements. I had to fight for it, too. No one else wanted to take the risk of evacuating the people there. In a room of 12, I was the only one who cared for hundreds of lives. Ina knew that was an exaggeration. Half he cared. Slightly less than he cared about winning. It was what made him good. He had served Ina well, first as a hired bodyguard, then in the Prin Guard, and as general of the packed army. It was his need to win that had brought her back to Prin when she had wanted to forsake the duties before her. She had not wanted to marry the strange Alara man in whose lap she now lounged. She had not wanted to run Prin after her parents. She had taken up the mantle because no one else would, and she didn't want to watch Prin die. Happy was for hire, so she had hired him. She had run away to Seafield, right when Happy needed to leave Seafield. So he had convinced her she needed to win for her people in Prin, because it was the only way he could win. The journey out and back had taken longer than the time she had spent there, and she had always been grateful for Happy. He was a face and a name that others may have forgotten. He was her cornerstone. He had taught her about a struggle she had never known. It was all around, even here in Prin. Layers of society, those like the mountain tribes that were on Earth risking a small evacuation team to save, before giant Zanai armies swept over them. Living beside those like her that an entire squad would risk their lives for, without any questions. Joe dropped his hand to her back, massaging in slow circles, patient, waiting for whatever else she decided to share. She thought about Shara's own 17th birthday, if Prin was still standing. Ina had come up with various ways to avoid Shara's own conscription into the army of the Pact. She could easily pull off any of them and keep her daughter safe, she believed, keep Prin safe as well. But explaining those actions was not as simple, even to herself. Joe's two eldest daughters had both missed the mandatory conscription ruling, already enrolled as full-time students at the U. This had been their way out, along with having received no combat training. Mandatory conscription for them would have meant administrative tests and medical assistance, which near a battle is not without risk, but the closest to safety they could have gotten. This is where Dekro's son would end up. Shara was well trained. She would be in vanguards and used wherever her power was made her valuable. The way Happy talked about her, Ina suspected that would be everywhere. Ina had done her best to downplay how powerful her daughter was with source from the public, and even from her fellow politicians, but she could not hide it from Happy, who had helped train the girl. Would his desire to win still be more than how much she cared for Shara? Happy knew the other risks of placing Shara in the path of Zanai. Neither of them forgot the day when nearly 50 of them had charged with the walls of Prin, howling her name. She knew it was only a matter of time before he weighed those risks far enough below the consequences of not having her in the army. And then their occasional arguments would become something more. Am I weighing it all wrong too, she thought? Am I lying to myself just as much as I lied to them on today? She needed to get more conscriptions to help Happy. Wow, okay, words are hard right now. She needed to get more conscriptions, keep Happy happy, and give her a reason to not send Shara before her 17th birthday. There were only two other places untapped for her to get soldiers: the unregistered people in the underground
and Sentry. She would try to pull Sentry in first. At least they had some experience fighting Zanai. The Undergrounders would have to be a last resort. Ina decided these thoughts were not worth breaking the quiet peace of the moment with Joe. I'll send a message to Keystone tomorrow, she thought. She sat patiently as Joe worked his way over her mid and lower back. His hand gave a gentle but abrupt squeeze at the top of her butt, and he kissed the back of her head. Ina let him continue massaging before she stood, took both his hands into hers, and pulled him gently behind her toward the door to their bedroom. Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and read through chapter 4 and then do the line edit stuff for those after this sprint, because I'm going to be running out of time soon. So, alright, so chapter 4, Happy. It was the stench they all noticed first, but only Happy, born into a world of death a lifetime ago, recognized it. The mountains looked as they always did, the aspen, pine, and juniper trees framing the path that was covered in dry pine needles and the leftover crumbles of leaves decayed in winter. Everything was as it should have been, except for the smell. As they progressed toward a drop on the mountainside, the smell grew more potent. First it was sweet and curious. As it lingered in the nose, it turned sour. The aroma felt sticky. It permeated the senses and didn't quite leave before the next breath, which increased the intensity of the scent, rather than clearing it. By the time the troop of soldiers and civilians had progressed another dozen meters, the smell had dripped through them all, through the rags and clothing they held to their faces, and sent them into fits of hacking. Whatever it was, they all felt like it covered them, stuck inside them, clinging to their skin, hair, and clothes. Happy held his fist in the air, signaling for all that followed him to stop. He waved them toward the thicker trees to the north, and singled out one of the new recruits, Lee, to follow him. As the civilians and remaining escorts hid in a cluster of juniper trees, Happy stepped forward until the steep decline severed the group from his view. He shifted to descend at an angle that would prevent the pull of gravity from toppling him and his recruit. Lee followed the path Happy was making, but not at quite the right angle. He lost his footing a few times. Happy was certain he would watch the boy tumble to his death, but at the last second, he always managed to grab a whip from roots or a thick clump of brush before his slide turned into an unstoppable tumble. Halfway down, the trees thinned out. The smell was just as stifling, even as the air and sky opened around them. As the hill leveled out, Happy turned to head straight down the next decline of the mountainside. The trees near them seemed to wither. Leaves on some branches were dead. The air was still. There was not a single sound of birds or the gentle rustling of wildlife. Silence hung in the air, wrapping itself around them like the scent. Happy knew what the smell was, of course. He had seen many massacres. The smell of old blood and decay was not foreign to him. What was odd was the location. There had been no battle nearby. The entire war with the Zanai was about 10 miles to the west of them in the mountains. The only Zanai troops in the area had been a small group of scouts to the south. He had turned the small band of farmers and soldiers this way to avoid the scouts while they were evacuating. The small group was mostly Alara, himself, Lee, and a young farmer couple as the only Terrans. They were lucky. The group of Terrans would have gotten much closer to the Sinai before anyone noticed them. But the few Alara in the group that were gifted with intuition had felt the Sinai presence. Happy had sent the Alara soldiers to scout, and they had returned with the grim news that the Sinai blocked their former path. With as many children as adults in the group, and only a half-dozen soldiers, they were in no position to fight the Zanai, or even distract them. So here they were, on a path that wasn't really a path at all, walking into the thick scent of massacre and death. As Happy worked his way down the slope of the mountain, he saw a plateau in their decline. So their descent would make more sense there. Small outcropping of red rock lay slightly south of their location.
He turned again to travel horizontally across the mountainside. Small rocks jutted out from where the mountainside turned into a pure vertical drop of 30 feet. Not high enough to kill either Happy or Lee, but enough to make Happy's head spin. He hated heights, but knew he could send Lee to the edge to look at the lay of the platform below. He stepped halfway out, just far enough to get a view to the east where Prynne lay behind the hard-to-see crack in the cliff wall. Bounded on three sides with similarly steep hills, the valley was the last segment of the mountain to get through before approaching the west side of Prynne. Every entry point from the three mountainsides was precarious and created small natural barriers to any large army movements. The east side was not wide open, but a wall of rock 30 feet deep with only the one small pathway through it. The path itself came out of the cliff face beside Prynne, right in the center of the sightlines from the States House, where Prynne had built its strongest defenses and placed its most skilled snipers. If the Pact put its army on the east side of the cliffs, any push by the Zanai through the choke point would be near suicidal. Even if the Zanai could push past Prynne's immediate defenses on the other side and spread out to the north and south, the weaponry held by Prynne could wipe out anyone in the fields outside its fortifications. This was the scenario Happy looked for first. Had some Zanai force gotten around his men, leaving the Prynne Guard to fight them off? The funnel made by the cliff walls was clear. In fact, the eastern half of the valley he could see looked exactly as expected. He took a slow step further out on the rock. Lee was creeping up behind him. Happy waved him back as he looked down into the valley straight below. A wave of nausea overtook him. He recognized immediately that what had been a dry, empty plain was now a lake of blood. He felt as if the lake knew he was there, looking at it. He could see it in his mind, rushing up towards him, forming arms of crimson water spouts that would grab him off his ledge and suck him into a sudden whirlpool mouth that would vanish after it devoured him. He quickly stepped back, nearly knocking Lee over. What? Happy quickly covered the boy's mouth with his hand while bringing his other hand up to put a finger to his own lips. He stepped out of the way and gestured to the boy to look for himself. He watched Lee creep up even slower to the edge. The boy was no soldier and had no thought to check the cliffs for any sign of battle. Instead, he looked straight down into the bloody field. His almond skin paled, and he backed up in a scramble. Happy gestured the boy to follow him further up the hill, then gave him orders. Go back to the group, send out Yorsh and Maltro to find a path north without Zanai in the way. As soon as they do, you take everyone through, then circle back around to reach Prynne from the north. It'll add a few days to the journey, but you cannot take the civilians through that without knowing what it is. Lee nodded and headed back up the hill when the full situation dawned on him. He turned to look back down at Happy. You're not coming back with us? Happy shook his head. We need to know what it is. That's my job now. We're close enough to Prynne. I can get there through this path if nothing is alive. If I get through, I will gather reinforcements to meet you on the northern path. Okay. Meet you on the northern path. The discomfort on Lee's face was contagious, and what had seemed to be the logical move to Happy now felt like his own death sentence. It was too late now. It had to be done, and he was the only one who could do it without endangering the group. As Lee stood digesting the information, Happy reached out, placed a hand on each of the boy's shoulders, and turned him to face back up the mountainside. Be quick, be quiet, go. The boy moved and quickly vanished into the trees. Happy turned on his heel, stood for a moment, the valley out of sight. He recalled the vision of it over and over again until conjuring up the image. It didn't provoke fear or the urge to run. He walked towards the southern hill, taking the longest but easiest path down. We might be able to finish this. Alright. Happy descended and with each step, the foliage in the ground darkened until all the green and golden hues preparing for the winter turned to various shades of red. The small, sharp thorn-like protrusions of red crystal grew on the plants. Nearest to the ground, the thorns were thickest, thinning as the foliage became taller. The smell continued to grow, assaulting him with such intensity that every other sense dimmed in comparison. He could not hear any wind or movement other than his own. He was aware of the sound of branches breaking as he stepped on them, but the only sound he really heard was the squish of the ground as he walked. Each drop of his sweat turned to blood in his own mind as it ran down his body, until he felt as though it drenched him, even though there was only small accumulations of red mud on his armored boots. He tasted wet copper sliding down his throat like clots of flesh each time he swallowed. He pulled his rifle from his strap and stepped down onto the flat ground of the valley. His boot crunched on something beneath it, then slipped down into a slurry of crimson. His composite armor had no traction on the slimy mud beneath the fluid, so he took a second to steady himself in the muck. He lowered his center of gravity until he felt solid, and pivoted with care to check the edges of the field, ready to fire at anything that moved. Everything was still. Happy took slow, calculated steps, making sure each foot was secure before shifting his weight onto it. The crunch of each step faded as he moved further into the swamp. He assumed that he had been walking on the red crystals that were now larger and protruding out of the goo. He realized how oddly beautiful they were, like giant rubies growing into the red brush. This deep in the field, many bushes seemed to have grown around large crystal formations that came up to his shins. He continued to move with caution, finding that the red fluid was getting deeper. In the night air, the fluid was cool against his skin, as he felt it seeping through the cracks of his armor and soaking through his underlying cloth suit. It didn't take long before he was wading through the bloody basin. Occasionally a large mound of rock or harder mud was on the floor of the lake. His boot would slip over it until it found a firm enough spot to stand on the right side. He could not see through the liquid well enough to determine what these lumps in the mixture were. He should have skirted the edge of the weird swamp. He knew that being out in the middle of the mess was a poor tactic. But the thought of taking a long way around the mess was too much, and he knew he could not keep control over the growing horror in his mind for much longer. Instead, he glanced around the edges and back to his destination with every step he took. Oh no, the disconnect. Let's see. With each step he took, his foot slipped again over something round and long. He had written off all these objects as fallen branches or logs that had been soaked through and accumulated layers of bloody slime. But this time his boot caught on some part of the object, dredging it up between his legs as he planted his foot ahead of it. He looked at the smooth object, started out thick but thinned out at the other end. The shape was not a fallen branch or other foliage. He shifted his weight to his back leg, placed the toe of his boot under the object, and pushed the smaller end up out of the sledge. It flopped upwards, spraying drops of red as it broke free of the surface. Happy recognized what had been a forearm, with the hand still attached. A few fingers were missing, but the others that were left held a stiff and slightly curled grasp that he had seen many times before. The lifeless hand gripped at the air in obvious torment before slipping back under the ripples of crimson fluid. Happy pushed through the fluid with renewed vigor. Each step over an object now conjured fresh images in Happy's mind. He frantically scrambled to make sense of it all, as if assigning a body part to what he was stepping on and over made it better. As his mind raced to solve a puzzle that was ultimately unimportant, he realized that he could hear a noise other than his own movement from the field of blood. There was a low hum. It took him a moment to slow down the momentum he had built up in the water, but he came to a halt, even though his mind was yelling at him to move faster. He could not feel any vibrations in the ground. He glanced around. There was nothing visible in the field.
He was nearly halfway through the valley before the pass. He was just a few dozen steps away from where the plants and trees turned back to greens and browns. He resumed moving, thrusting each leg through the liquid as hard as he could, pausing for just a moment to check his footing before leaning into the next stride. The humming did not get louder or go away. The consistency of the noise drove itself into his mind, and he felt panic well up inside his chest. He picked up the pace. Each step, he reminded himself to find solid footing before shifting his weight. The reminders fell flat and his speed increased. He knew he was not checking his footing well enough. Even so, he pushed harder toward the pass. He nearly fell 3 times as he moved through the mushy red ground. Finally, the depth of the red lessened. First returned and covered merely the tops of his boots. Then it merely came halfway up them. As he emerged from the weight of the lake, he moved faster, free from the physical weight, taking on another weight as he scanned the valley. He was no longer finding body parts in the soup, but seeing them and bounding over them. He found he had not been imaginative enough. While legs and arms were a part of the mixture, other parts were entrails and organs. A few pieces belonged to rabbits alongside the head of a fox. One part, on a mound, nearly clear of blood, was smooth and spongy, and the only name he could assign it was brain. The white chunks on the ground beside it looked like pieces of skull. Another few feet away lay what was a jawbone. Crystals had grown over the part of the bone and touched the ground, creating a strange impression of a crown thrown the wrong way. Halfway took a last leap out of the muck onto the patch of ground next to the brain and bone fragments. From there he could leap from one clear spot to another until he was out of the bloody field entirely. He kept moving. He was nearly to the cliff pass before he realized he was running at full speed. His heart was pounding, and he could hear nothing else. He stopped to catch his breath. The stench of everything he had experienced in the field was still coating him. His armor was tinted red from the thighs down. He shivered with relief as he realized he was clear. As his breath slowed and his mind cleared, the humming returned. It was less like a distinct vibration now, and more like a note being sung. A single note hanging around him. He pushed it back in his mind as he leaned forward, placing his hand on his knees and gulping for breath. Each breath quivered and gave out before he had fully drawn it in. He cursed at himself for his own lack of fortitude, and thought of the soldiers on the other side of the pass. His soldiers. He stood and looked back at the field, breathing each shaky breath and replaying his walk through the blood swamp. He saw himself running to where he stood now, and told himself no one could ever see him run like that. His breathing was steady enough then. He turned back toward Kryn. The guards of the pass were minutes away, likely already alerted that someone was coming through the pass. He forced himself to whistle, finding that only a soft single note came out. Walking through to the end of the pass, he painted a smile on his face. All right. With 3 seconds to spare. It is time for me to leave. So, thank you all who watched and who listened to the bloody story. Hopefully I will see some of you again soon.